Thank you for coming today.
Pleasure.
You've been a great partner now for, what has it been, over 10 years?
It's been over 10 years, dude. We met in a crazy way. You actually came into the office at the invitation of someone else, if you don't recall, and if you recall.
Yes, I do.
And I was actually working with your partner at that time, who you guys all have gone different ways.
Yep, that was Bank of America days.
Yeah, I was working with your partner at that time, and I think she made the introduction, and the rest is history.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing with me, because I have a mortgage background as well, the biggest thing that the reason I wanted to work with you was the fact that you actually knew the business.
Thank you.
It's the worst thing for a real estate agent to have is a slow no. You have never done that to me. You have always given me a quick no, and then we've come through. I would say it's at least 400 transactions at this point.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
At least. And that's been a biggest part of my business, and that's why I wanted to talk to you today, was because it brings credibility to me as a real estate agent, because I can come through. Even with the team now, we had a situation the other day, and she said that the listing agent, because you were working on the deal, said, "Oh yeah, just send it over if it's Mike."
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
That's a tribute to you.
That's awesome.
So that was amazing. Talk to me about how you started, why you got into this, because you were in the restaurant business before.
I was.
Which is completely different.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that.
Yeah, this is all dumb luck for me. I mean, I got into this business in 2005. I was working in the restaurant business at the time, and going through a separation. And one of my customers was in the mortgage industry, and I had. In our community, we had a lot of people that were in real estate. Southern Maryland was booming at that time, so there was a lot of new construction going on. And so real estate agents were, all over the place. There was a lot of real estate agents. It was a big real estate community. I really, honestly, coming from Baltimore City, real estate community wasn't, even though there's so many properties up there, the real estate community wasn't as prevalent as a job as it was in Southern Maryland because of the growth. I think it was attributed more to as a growth. And so at that time, this place was booming. There was new construction going up every day. And so I didn't really want to be a real estate agent. I didn't know, I'm not a salesperson in that respect. I don't know that I would have done that very well. I think that, mortgages were something where I could hide behind a desk. Didn't have to go actually meet people. I could hide behind a desk.
Well, it fits your personality, Mike.
Yeah,
You're a finite person. You're a bottom line person. I can figure this out because all of those rules apply.
Yep.
That is you, and that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
That's why you're good at it.
Yeah, I'm not the person. I'm not the guy that's going to hold your hand and walk through the house. And I think that takes a special kind of social awareness and presence that I just don't have. I'm the guy that's going to help you with your financial decisions. I can work best with a computer, a calculator, and a phone.
Yeah, and that's what we need you to do. We need the money there on time.
There we go.
That makes all of this work,
yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than, I mentioned it before, a slow no,
right.
By somebody who's great. Great at, I guess, saying what everyone wants to hear,
yeah.
But then figures out in 2 or 3 weeks, because a real estate transaction only is about 30 days.
Yeah.
3 weeks in, going, oh my gosh, there's a problem, and they would tell me about the problem that should have been identified right from the start.
Yeah.
There are some situations where obviously no one can anticipate.
Sure.
I mean, we had one just recently where you took it over, and that was an amazing thing for those people, and everybody
crazy.
Deserved that deal to close,
Yep.
And you got it from somebody who said no way, and that has to get you going, because as much as you and I talk, and we talk a lot, you excel when someone else says it can't be done. That is one. Not that everybody should dump their bad deals on you, but you earn good deals by doing the bad deals. And why do you think you're better at that than everybody else?
It's not better or worse. I think that I like a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
The most challenging of files are always the ones I have the most fun with. I like being able to do something that someone else can't do. I think that's something that's always been a part of me personally. Even when I was in the restaurant business, I like the fact that I cooked everything from scratch. And
dude, you can cook, man. That is something that no one, everyone needs to know,
right?
But not bother you with.
I appreciate it.
You can cook. It is amazing. It's weird how that's completely different. It seems like to me a personality type than mortgages, but I guess it's not because that's a precise thing too, right? Well, what's the difference?
It is. I mean, because for me, we cooked everything from scratch, right? So everything, and my best nights were the New Year's Eve, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day. Those are sort of the Super Bowls of the restaurant business, and being able to cook everything from scratch, doing 600-700 meals over a 6 hours time span, and maintaining 20-minute ticket times. That's the challenge. That's the fun, and making certain that every single dish tastes the exact same. That's a challenge. It's fun. So the restaurant business and the mortgage industry is not much different. Being able to do a loan that everybody can do, I mean, it's fun. I mean, it's cool, and it's but doing that loan that so few people can do, even down to the point where you get accused of being creative, because while no one ever thought of that, that's always fun, right? I mean, the loan you're talking about, I had so many people involved in that. At so many different layers without actually being specific anything. But it was funny talking to the guys over at VA, and the VAs are like, man, I never would have thought to even approach it from that perspective. That's a great idea. And while it's super creative, you're super right. The guidelines will work on that. And that was why it worked. And it was really, I always joke around, if I ever need to come up with an idea, I sleep on it.
Yeah.
My brain works great when I turn off everything else and I fall asleep, and then I wake up in the morning and I found the solution. I dreamt about the solution. I joke around about it, but it is true. I mean, and I focus on, I go to, when I have my biggest issues, that's when I think I excel the most, is I kind of just take a nap and I sleep through it, and my brain seems to kind of work on it. But I love those things. I mean, those things to me just have, those are fun times. That's what I love the most.
So that's interesting. You say you just slept on it, because I think that's your strength. Because a lot of people will do a knee jerk. There's sort of this big know-it-all mentality in this business, where a lot of people know it all that don't know it all,
right?
And they're not humble enough to sit back and go, wait a second, let's figure this out. Yeah. And the other thing is, I like about how you solve it, you do it through transparency, and you're not just, because if you call an underwriter, because that's a different personality type. I mean, I love underwriters, but you can't tell that person what to do.
Right.
You have to plead your case in a very clever way that they're like, oh yeah, that does make sense.
Right.
You're not insulting me by telling me that I'm initially wrong on something. You're saying, well, maybe we should look at it from this approach.
Yeah.
And this is how I got that information, which makes everybody want to work with you, instead of going, oh my gosh, Mike's calling me. What is he going to say? Is he going to tell me again my job? I think you do it in a different way, which is why you get stuff done.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and that's, I don't want to sound cocky when I say that, but I would agree with that. I mean, it's interesting that I have calls with underwriters on a regular basis, but I can almost say that I hope they don't mind my calls. And there's a difference, because I also, I'm responsible for a number of other loan officers. I do manage the area. And some of the conversations I have with some of the underwriters is, oh my God, that person's calling me, and not my people. Never my people.
No, of course not.
But that person's calling me. God, I don't want to talk to that guy.
That's right.
I don't want to talk to that girl. And so I do learn from that and say, hey, listen, when I do call the underwriter, it's just like, hey, listen, let's work our way through this. I think there's an option. I think there's a possibility. Give me your thoughts on this. This is the problem that I see. What do you see? And let's kind of work our way through a solution that'll work. Because ultimately, when you turn down a file, and this is also what I believe more often than not, and I say this to people, a file that gets turned down, sometimes it really gets turned down just for lack of creative alternatives, a creative solution. The guidelines are the same. It's just a deeper understanding of the guidelines that kind of distinguishes one person from another. Having a better understanding of the guidelines has probably been my biggest strength. You know, and I was actually speaking with an agent earlier today, and one of their questions when they talk to a loan officer is, how long have you been in this business? I hate to say this, I hate that question.
Yeah.
You know, now I've got credibility.
Because you could do 2 loans a year for 20 years,
yep.
and you're not putting in the reps. You're not putting in the time.
And, you know, I've got credibility now. I've been in the business for,
you
know, 18, 19 years now, so I've got my time in it. So now it's like, well, I've been in 18, 19 years. But
when somebody tells me how good they are, they're not good. I instantly know that. And if someone's telling me their resume and I don't even know their name yet, they're terrible.
Yeah. They're trying to sell you.
That is, when you're good, you don't have to say you're good.
No.
You don't have to tell them your resume.
Yep.
It drives me crazy when people do that. So,
yeah, I mean, and you're right, and you're absolutely right. When people have to lead with their resume, they're not leading with value. They're leading with a script. If you lead with value, if someone calls me and says, you know, if they want to vet what I've got, I mean, like, look, I mean, you know, anything can happen with a file. You never know. I mean, the file that we did turn down, I think the people that led off with that file, they had no idea what they were running into, the buzzsaw that they were running into as time went by. And again, like you said, sleeping on it really does sometimes, it helps, because in our world, the moment I start trying to solve a problem as it approaches versus taking a step and solving all the problems that could come from this, that's when I begin my downfall. If I start solving a problem, for example, you know, there's 10 different problems, but I start solving them one at a time, the other 9 problems don't get solved. Other problems build on top of it. And so if I've got 10 problems, I got to know I've got 10 problems. I got to solve all 10 at one time. I can't solve one at a time.
So why did you say that day when I said, this is the reason that it turned down? You said, I don't want to know, just give it to me.
Yeah, I want to see the file on its own merit. I don't want to know the mistakes that other people make.
Yeah.
Because then I just try to solve the problems that they had versus solving all the problems that I see.
Yeah.
One of the biggest mistakes that when people take a turn down file is, send me over everything you've got and I'll take a look at it. I don't want anything that you got. I want to look at it from scratch on my side of things and evaluate it my way. I've got what you told me in the background, but more often than not, sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes that's not even the issue. I had a file that we helped out with last night, and it really came down to a lack of communication between all the parties involved. None of them knew what the exact problem was. And had any of them just taken a moment to get on the same page, they would have solved this problem a week ago. And it took about maybe 30 minutes of just kind of evaluating everything in ってentirety to say, okay, guys, here's the problem that you all have. And I didn't take the file on. I just helped them fix the file, keep it where it is, because the client loses in the end on that one.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to take the file on, because if you don't take the file on, it's not going to close. It's run its course where it is. My mentor, when I first got in this business, used to say, the longer a file sits around, the more hair grows on it, right? And sometimes a file gets too hairy in the place where it is, there's nothing you can do with it.
Yeah.
You know, so, and he's right. And he's very right about that. And so sometimes you just have to let it move on to a new world in order to overcome the obstacles, because people can't forget what they already know. And whether it's relevant or not, it's become out. So in this particular case here, sometimes it's just a matter of putting everybody in the same page and going, hey guys, you guys are all on the same page. You guys are all in the same church. You just need to get in the same pew. And so let's get you all in the same pew so you guys can go to closing. I don't need to take this file on.
Yeah.
You'll remember me the next time you have something.
Yes.
And I'll take that file. I just don't need this one. So, you know, that's I think that's where our business is. I think our business is one of those that problem solving is key in our business, and I think more people just want to appease as opposed to problem solving work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree with that. And a lot of people don't want to actually lean forward and figure it out. They just want it done. I don't want to mess with this anymore. I just want it done. There's a lot of part-time business people in our business, and that's should be more barriers to entry.
When you're in sales too, confidence is imperative, right? But sometimes confidence is arrogance.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes people don't understand the concept of staying humble and staying hungry, right? I mean, no matter how busy you are, you can always be busier, and no matter how confident you are, you can still be humble. And I think that's a part of in sales in general, I think that's a message that's often lost. Humility and hunger will keep you successful.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a big difference between, like, if I look at the amount of business I was doing 10 years ago and I thought I was at capacity and I can do that in a month now. It's funny how you change and just get better at things. But I still am trying to figure out a better way to do things all the time. I guess I've been beat up enough to where the point where I don't have a know-it-all brain in my body. I mean, I can't, just because this business is just, there's so many variables that are involved. And if you have to stay humble and just kind of lean back and just kind of figure it out and then know the overall goal. Sometimes houses shouldn't be purchased.
Yeah.
Sometimes loans shouldn't be done.
It's the truth.
I think, with my background, I had a development background and I borrowed a bunch of money back in 08, 09. I shouldn't have got those loans.
Right. Yeah. No,
and I think about that. And some people shouldn't have bought right now. Like, I think you're pretty good about that, coaching buyers. Maybe this isn't the right situation. And I always tell people, it's never the last best real estate deal.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah, that's the truth.
And there's a continuous market, continuous flow of new listings coming on. There is a continuous flow of buyers. There's never, we got to take this deal. It's never that way.
No. And you never need one deal. One deal should never make or break anything.
And the buyers should, the reason we spend so much time doing inspections and doing different things, because they have to know exactly what they're getting into.
Right.
And I think with the loan process, you're the same way. I think the biggest mistake that I see is people think that they can pull this off, but I think you coach people better on budgeting and different things.
I try.
I think you do, because you and I talk about it all the time. People are making $150,000 and they want to buy a $900,000 house just because it works on paper, and that's not practical.
Right.
Sometimes the math on these guidelines are a little bit too generous, I think.
Absolutely.
And they don't know that a $900,000 house is going to have a $1,500 electric bill.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy.
It's the truth.
So, but sometimes you can't get in people's way. I mean, it's just, what do you do with that?
I will tell you that I sometimes lose business because of that. I know that about myself. And sometimes I feel bad that I hate the fact that I lost the deal. Sometimes I feel okay about the fact I lost the deal, because it's not me that's going to put these people in a bad situation. It's kind of, it's sometimes a hard pill to swallow, right? We never want to lose a deal, but in the same token is sometimes a deal was never to be had. And sometimes that's how I look at it, right? So, I don't feel comfortable putting people in situations where they're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is a matter of talking myself out of the deal because I gave them too much information. But at the end of the day, I kind of feel better about myself. That at least, if nothing else, this will sit back in the back of their mind. And in a lot of those cases, I wind up getting those people back. I'll get that person back because they'll realize the sales guy, or they thought they wanted just the sales guy themselves. They realized the sales guy or gal was just a salesperson and wasn't looking out in their best interest. I kind of look at it from the perspective, if I didn't know better, I would want to be educated.
Yes.
And I say that from the perspective of when I'm a veteran. I was in the military. I served. I got out of the military. Since the time I got out of the military up until the time I used my first VA loan, I had already bought and refinanced and sold maybe 4 homes. Never used my VA loan. I was always discouraged. I was discouraged by the real estate agent. I was discouraged by the loan officer.
Why?
Because they felt that, it's a little difficult, VA this and VA that. And the truth be told, it's just that people were inexperienced in terms of the VA loan that I dealt with. Of all the people that I had dealt with up until that point, just didn't know much about the VA loan. So their lack of knowledge became a discouraging piece for me as a consumer. And so that was one of the things that for me, I never wanted to be that guy. I wanted to learn about every loan product I could, so I never discouraged somebody based on my lack of knowledge. I discouraged because it may not have been the best option for them, but not because I didn't want to learn it. When it comes to renovation loans, for example, a lot of people are like, oh my God, renovation loans are horrible. They take forever, blah, blah, blah. I love them. They take forever when you don't know. They can be time consuming, but they're a great way for people to buy a home in the area they want to be in and make it the home that they want, versus trying to find the home that they want in the area that they want to be in and having to compromise because either the home doesn't exist or the area is not, the area doesn't allow for it. So they can have the best of both worlds, right?
What's the ideal, what scenario works for that rehab loan?
For a rehab?
Yeah.
I always tell people, look, I mean, if you want to be in a specific area, look for something that has the structure that you're looking for. Like, for example,
in the space.
In the space, right? I mean, it may not be the perfect house. It may, I'll use the perfect example. I had a guy years ago, worked with one of my other real estate partners. This guy was looking for a home for nearly 2 years. And this is what got me into renovations, ironically enough. He had been looking for a house for nearly 2 years. Every single home he found didn't have this, wasn't in the right space, wasn't this, wasn't that, million excuses.
Mm-hmm.
Finally found the home in the neighborhood he wanted. It was the neighborhood he had always wanted. The price range was perfect. It was actually below market value. And the primary reason, it didn't have a garage. All the other homes in that area usually had garages or finished basements, whatever. His just didn't happen to have a garage. It was one of the first homes built in that community. And so he was just going to walk away. And I'm like, dude, no way. We'll build a garage.
Yeah.
$25,000, you can build a garage. It would cost you more money to buy a home in that same neighborhood.
$100,000 more.
Right.
Yeah.
It had the 2-car garage than it would be to build a 2-car garage. And so the long and short of it is that's the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
It's to fulfill the need that prevents you from buying the home.
Yeah.
Right? It's the perfect home. It's just missing X.
Yeah.
So how do I give it X?
Yeah.
That's a renovation loan, right? And so a lot of times when I tell people, if you're having a hard time finding a home, look at the search. Look at the location you want to be in. I want to be in La Plata, right? I got to be in Kings Grant neighborhood. I got to be in La Plata. Look in the houses in there. You can always make that house the way you want it. You just can't pick up a house that you want and put it in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But you can take that, and that's where renovation will come in. And so education along that line, same thing. Education has really been the foundation of how I do my business, is not only knowing the education myself, but also educating clients in terms of every option versus just the ones I feel most comfortable with. And I think you probably can attest to that being in this business. Mm-hmm. We often find ourselves pigeonholed to what we feel comfortable with versus willing to open up our minds and expand beyond our scope.
Yeah. Yeah. So doing the renovation, that would be, as an agent, I would have to start looking a little bit further down in the budget because, we set up listing alerts.
Sounds good, yeah.
And that's something that just occurred to me. If someone's in that $500,000 is their top budget, maybe I should look at $350 and put in all their parameters. And then if we start at $350 and then we can do a renovation loan. Or don't even put a dollar
number. Just put in zip code of this zip code with this much square footage or more. Because you can always, on the renovation loan, so using the renovation loan and going from there, you can add square footage. With some types of renovation loans, you can tear the property down to just one wall. Just retain one wall. I mean, I did this in Annapolis about 2 years ago, where they inherited, basically, for lack of a better way to put it, it looked like a shack on a nice piece of property in downtown Annapolis. They inherited this property. To call it a property is treating it far more than it deserves. On a decent piece of lot land, they tore the whole thing down to one wall, and you probably say that they probably took that one wall out too.
They did.
But they tore it all the way down to the foundation and rebuilt it from there. And they built an amazing house.
That's smart.
They built a $400,000 structure. House was worth well over $1 million by the time it was done. It spent $400,000 in renovation costs to build this place. It was well over $1 million. And to look at it, it looked like it had been a crack house or something. It was so beat down. And from where it started to where it ended, it's just amazing. And so inheriting that piece of property, being able to do that renovation loan, gave them everything they could ever possibly want and more. And at the end of the day, they inherited it's $400,000 house that's worth over $1 million. And this was a couple years ago, so it's worth even more now.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
Good
so
for them.
renovation loans are just, I think they're phenomenal. I think that, and there's so many other loan types out there that people don't look at because, again, the person that you talk to doesn't do those types. I mean, that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah.
Is that the person that they talk to doesn't do that type of lending, so they don't get that sort of extra piece. They don't get that sort of extra knowledge.
Oh yeah.
So again, that's one of the things that
that's lazy. That's being lazy.
It is. I mean, but also it's comfort. I mean, I'm not going to say lazy, just solely lazy, but sometimes it's comfort. I mean, you know what you know, right? I mean, how many times we hear or say that we know what we know, right? I mean, at some point, it's one of those things that people. I've been doing this for 35 years, kind of thing, and for 35 years, I always do conventional loans, and so 35 years later, I don't need to learn FHA loans. I'll continue doing the conventional. And people make a great career out of that. I mean, that's who they are. I want to learn it all. I want to know it all, so that when you come to me or your buyer comes to me and says, "Hey, they just want to buy a house," we explore every single option available, whether it be down payment assistance programs, whether it be renovation loans, VA, FHA.
Down payment assistance programs. Before I forget, so everybody says to me, because there's a big population of people buying the first house. Everybody always says, first time home buyer, I want that program and I want the down payment assistance. Why? Who started that? The first time home buyer program. What is that? I mean, why is that said? Why is that like a universal thing?
So the best way I can describe this is there is no quote unquote just first time home buyer programs. I mean, there are, but there's not, right? A lot of times people will come to me and say, I just want a first time home buyer program, or I'm not a first time home buyer program, so I can't get a first time home buyer program. So first time home buyer programs by nature are designed to overcome the obstacles that most first time home buyers have.
Okay.
And that's something that, I kind of roll that off my tongue just as much as I say good morning to the kids when I say
you have to,
because I say it so many times.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? So what are the obstacles that first time home buyers have? Well, in today's world, I mean, when I bought my first home in the early 90s, to find a house that was over $100,000, I mean, you were buying in a really wealthy neighborhood, right? I mean, you're buying in a high-end neighborhood or whatever it is. Housing prices really didn't cross that six-figure as an average. They didn't really cross that six-figure threshold until probably the late 90s, early 2000s. And then when they did, they were exponential. And it went from a house that was $150,000 in 2000 to $600,000 house, $700,000 house today.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a huge growth.
It's a tribute to the lending programs to get.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
It is a tribute. I don't know that it's a tribute, but I would say that it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate as a result of the lending programs available.
Oh.
You made people eligible to buy more by finding creative ways to get them financed. For the longest time, when I first got into business, everyone did the 80-20 loans. They were 100% financing, 80% first, 20% second. And if you didn't do an 80-20 loan, that's because you had 20% to put down, right? I mean, that's just the mentality. Oh, I need 20% to put down. Now people know that you can do other types of loans that don't require a 20% down payment. But up until that point, everyone thought 20% was the minimum threshold. And because that's what you needed when you bought a home, and more often than not.
When it was $75,000, when it was $50,000, I can come up with 20% for that.
Exactly. It's a lot easier to come up 20% of $100,000.
No one paid my closing costs. If you sell me your house for $75,000, you don't have to pay my closing costs.
Yeah, exactly. Very true, right? I mean, and so that was it's interesting when you make those comparisons, so many people were talking about those, and like, yeah, I mean, it's an unfair comparison because it's $75,000 and 20% down on $75,000, that's $15,000.
Piece of cake.
Right? $15,000 would be the bare minimum requirement down payment for a $300,000 house today. At 5%, right? So, it's not, you're comparing apples and trees.
Yeah.
They're both an apple grew on a tree, but the bottom line is an apple is not, you can't eat the tree, but you can certainly eat the apple. So, the first time home buyer programs and down payment assistance programs became means to help people still acquire property in a time when it costs so much more to get property, right? And so that's where the first-time home buyer programs came out. There are a lot of programs that are great for first-time home buyers. Are not exclusive to first-time home buyers.
So
FHA.
what's that? So if I,
Like,
say,
for example,
instance,
FHA, right?
yeah.
FHA
So if
is
I'm a
included.
$300,000 buyer, no. Let's go back. I want my payments to be average rental is around here of a nice place is $2,000 to $2,500. If I come to you and say I want my payments to be $2,200,
Okay.
what is that scenario?
So first, it would be how much do you have for down payment?
Yeah.
Would be because obviously $2,200 with 20% down is different than $2,200 with
I
3.5%.
I don't have 20% down. I am
So
the normal
you're
person who
probably
doesn't
going to be
have
somewhere between 275 and below.
Okay.
When you factor in all of the things that go into that payment, principal, interest, mortgage insurance, homeowners insurance, taxes, all the things that would go into it, you're probably about 275 and below, right? Given the fact that interest rates are now probably about 6.5%. And rates will come down, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure.
6.5 is historically awesome.
It's still not bad. It's still a great rate.
6.5, 30-year fixed,
Yeah.
nothing adjusted.
It's definitely higher than the rates have been for the last 13 years, but it's still not a bad rate, right? But I mean, so $2,200 would be your monthly payment, or $275 would be the sales price and under, depending on a couple of other different factors.
Yeah.
But in terms of what it takes to get into that, I mean, minimum down payment's about 3% if you're a first-time home buyer for a conventional loan, 3.5% for an FHA loan.
So what are you to put normally everybody in an FHA?
Well,
Because conventional is a little bit harder.
And I don't want to say
guidelines?
normally. It really depends, right? So when you're comparing FHA or a government loan with a conventional loan, one of the things I tell people is when you're looking at loans, we're looking at risk, right? And risk is you as an individual. It's how much are you putting down versus how much you're borrowing. The percentage, 3% down and 97% borrowing. It's the term of the loan. And that's why sometimes adjustable rate mortgages have lower interest rates than fixed rate mortgages, because those are shorter periods of time that those rates are guaranteed. So you're talking about you as an individual, you're talking about your credit score, what your income is, what your debt ratios are. The housing, how much are you borrowing versus how much do you put down? So if you're putting down the bare minimum, you're good, but you're not great in terms of you as an individual, and you're borrowing at the 30-year term on a fixed rate, the highest term, or even 40-year terms, they're coming back out again. You're going to pay a higher rate if you go with certain types of loans like a conventional loan.
Okay.
Right? Because conventional loans are 100% risk-based. So in that case there, you want to see what can mitigate risk, right? So an FHA loan would be a perfect example. If you weren't great, you're putting down the least amount of money as possible for a 30-year term, you may want to consider a government loan like an FHA loan.
Okay.
If you're not qualified for a USDA or VA, and we can talk about what those are in a second as well.
Okay.
But FHA may be a better course of action because, when you look at an FHA loan, FHA is a leveling loan, right? It levels the playing field. Do you qualify or don't you qualify? Plain and simple. Risk doesn't factor in the same way, right? So it's not layers of risk associated with the interest rate. It is, do you qualify or not?
So what's the credit score for FHA?
Different lenders will have different scores.
What deal's going to close?
People with qualifying credit, meaning the fact that as long as they don't have late payments in the last 12 months.
Okay.
So
but credit score wise, 580.
580 is where the minimum credit score typically is. Most people are at that 580 and above.
580. Okay.
And of course, again, here's the thing: 580 as long as you don't have late payments in the last 12 months. I hate to say it, when it comes to credit, if you've got a 580 credit score, you probably have some late payments in the last 12 months.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, exactly, right? So credit, all right, so let's talk about credit. What's the big deal? It's the means that lenders have to evaluate your ability to repay debt.
Whether you open the mail.
Yeah,
some people don't even open their mail.
Right? I mean, I do get that question a lot. What's the big deal? I mean, I'm going to make the housing payments.
If you would have told me, I would have made that payment, Mike.
Right.
Come on.
But we don't know. I mean,
that was back in April.
Yeah, exactly, right? We don't know. We don't know we don't know if someone's going to make a payment. We can only evaluate it. So I would put it to you. If you weren't sure that I was going to repay you money that I borrowed from you, would you lend it to me?
But I really want the house.
Yeah, exactly, right? I really want to make sure I can pay.
I really want a Ferrari.
Yeah, exactly. I had a guy. I remember this to this day. It was really funny. It was one of my first year in the business, and this guy came in the office, and this was back when every type of loan qualified. I mean, it was funny. It was back in those days where you'd be sitting at the settlement table. All of a sudden, we discover that you don't qualify for that loan. Give me about 15 minutes. Let me redo a whole new loan for you, and I'll send you out new documents. You could redo the loan the day of closing, and still close that afternoon.
When was that?
It's back in 2005, 2006. You could figure out. I mean, there was always an avenue to get somebody qualified. I mean, you really had to be bad if you couldn't buy a house back then. You may not get the best loan. You may get the highest rate on the world. You may get crazy terms, but you'll get the house. So, and that's actually how I got into doing more government loans back then, because I just couldn't fathom. I've never subscribed.
You're talking about the option arms. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, pay option arms. What is it called? Subprime loans. The fact that there was a term called subprime is a problem, right? I mean,
yes.
That in and of itself was a problem.
228s, the 327s.
Yeah,
all of
and
that.
we could talk about who was at fault for the mortgage crisis.
Yeah.
I think everybody was at fault.
Yeah, sure.
The mortgage industry was at fault. Agents were at fault. Stock market was at fault. I mean, bottom line is Moody's and S&P and all those, those guys are the ones that rated these things. We didn't rate them. I gave you a product that says, hey, listen, if you can bring me a self-employed borrower with a 550 credit score and no history of repayment of debt and no verification of where their income is from or where their money's coming from for down payment, what would you rate that product? Because I could sell it to a lot of people. And then Moody's comes out and says, well, we'll give that an A+ rating. I'm going to buy a bunch of investors who are going to back on that loan, right?
So that was the problem
what happened
during that period, is that if you were an honest person,
horrible.
You couldn't say you shouldn't buy this house.
No.
Because the buyer would just find somebody else that would do it. So that
absolutely.
was a very terrible time. And that's the difference between that housing bust, which happened.
Yeah.
But I don't believe there's one that's coming on this one because it's been
fully
the underwritten.
The difference between the industry we came from back then and the industry we're in today is back then, like I said, if you didn't qualify, I'll find a way to qualify you. If you don't qualify today, you don't qualify. I'm not going to give you. I mean, there's just you just. And if we do the quote unquote exotic route, there are some exotic loans that exist. There's DSCR loans, things of that nature that are designed for people.
What's a DSCR? What are you talking about?
So DSCR loan is really more for investors. If you're looking to buy an investment property, 20% down payment or more, and we're basically looking at the rent roll for the property.
Okay.
So can the property support itself?
By itself, yes.
Yes.
So you're more from
monthly,
a revenue perspective
correct.
than a market value perspective.
Yeah. So I'm not using my income to qualifier. I'm using the cash that I have, the revenue stream from the property itself, and I'm using that as the basis to buy an investment property.
Okay.
And what's the logic behind it? Well, if I'm putting 20, 25% down, am I going to be quick to lose that over payments? No, I'm probably going to fight for my money. Especially in today's market. If I buy a $300,000 house with anywhere between $60,000 and $75,000 as a down payment, one, I probably have money. But number two, I'm not going to let this thing go just for nothing. I mean, in the past, investment properties, you only needed 5%. And then there was the quote unquote fast and easy loan where you can put down 5%. I didn't verify where the 5% even came from. And as long as you had a 680 credit score or better, you qualified. I didn't even verify your income. I didn't verify your assets. I just needed to make certain you had a 680 credit score or higher and 5% to put down. And I don't care where the 5% came down from. That was a fast and easy loan back in the day. And that was a big investor loan.
Was that what kind of loan was that? Was that a portfolio loan?
That was a countrywide portfolio loan.
Countrywide portfolio loan.
Fast and easy. And not only did Countrywide do those loans, they actually bought those loans from other investors and things of that nature too. So
oh my gosh.
It was unfortunately one of the things that led to Countrywide downfall.
So I tell people all the time, the dream home, if you can't buy your dream home, you and I aren't in our dream homes, no one is.
Right.
Let's buy a solid piece of real estate that we can eventually either it appreciates and we can sell, or we can use it as an investment property later on. Because what is the guideline for moving out? What's
recently
the document?
Vacated property.
Yeah.
So recently vacated property, you can use rental for some types of products.
Yeah.
You can use new rental income to offset the payments for that. So for example, if it's a conventional loan and I'm living in my current property, I'm living this as my primary residence, recently vacating the property so I can buy another property, I can use a lease agreement or what's called a 1007, like a rent schedule from an appraiser as to what the rent value for that home would be, or I can use prevailing market. So it depends on the loan product that I'm using, but there are different options I can use to offset those payments if I'm going to rent that home out and buy my new home. You know, you make an interesting
Let me make one point.
Sure.
So how long do I, say I'm a $300,000 buyer, but I want my parents' house, which is a 550 house.
Right.
That's where I see myself. I buy that house. How long do you typically have to stay in it to not have a red flag go up? Like, what is my timeline on?
A year is typically that's pretty much across the board.
Okay.
You got to be in the house for at least 12 months before you can vacate that property and move on. Yeah.
Because your income is going to basically be the same for those 12 months.
Well, the thing is,
unless you get a promotion or.
So go back to risk, right?
Yeah.
And one of the elements of risk that I forgot to mention was the type of property that you're buying. So it's not just whether it's a condo or single family or condominium or co-op or things like that in a single family, but are you using it as your primary? Is it a second home or is it an investment, right? Think about the levels of risk. If it's your primary residence and you can't, in financial situation changes and things get a little strict or tight on you, you're going to struggle to stay in your primary home, right? I mean, you got to have a place to live for yourself. You're going to be less apt to struggling for a second home and an investment property if there's not a lot of juice in that squeeze, meaning that you didn't put a lot of money down for those homes, right? So you're going to lose your investment property or your second home, which would be a vacation home or something like that, before you lose your primary residence.
Yeah.
And so, so that's the reason why they put that 1 year requirement. They don't want you building a portfolio off of calling everything you buy a primary residence, because with primary residence, because there's less risk, there's also less required down payment. You can buy your primary residence with 3.5%, 5% down, depending on how many times you bought for in the past. But with
what's that number? What's that number that how many times you bought in the past?
So if it's a conventional home, if you're a first-time home buyer and it's a conventional loan, or either of the parties on there are first-time home buyers, you can buy with as little as 3% down.
Yeah, but how many can I have of those before someone's like, "Come on, man"?
Primary residence?
Yeah.
You can buy as many primary residences to start as every year, but FHA will allow a 3.5. But once you bought your primary residence, and it's a conventional loan, every loan from that point forth is 5%. You can buy as many primary residences as you need. You just have to wait a year before you buy your next one.
Okay.
So it's actually called house hacking. There's actually a term that people use for this. And so this goes back to the question of what is your dream home, right? I mean, is a home no more than a place to hang your hat and lay your head down at night? Or does it have to be a home that you live in for the next 30 years? Interestingly, I've had conversations with people, I've had conversations with people that talk about interest rates and over 30-year periods. I'm thinking, are you really going to be in there for 30 years? I mean, this isn't your parents' house anymore.
Right. And when people say, look how much I'm paying for the property, I'm like, okay, this is over 30 years. How much are you going to make over the next 30 years?
Well, not even that.
Let's add that up.
Be in it for 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you right now, the average person buys at least 7 homes over the course of their life.
Okay.
So let's do the math behind it. Do you know anyone who's 210 years old? I mean, no. Exactly, right? I mean, no one is 210 years old. So if by that logic, if the statistics say that you will buy at least 7 homes for yourself over the life of your loan, that would put you at 10 years. If you're going to live in each one for 30 years first, it's going to put you at 210 years. That's if you started buying when you were a baby. So you've really actually got to be about 230, 240 years old to have matched the statistic of 7 homes over your life, and lived in each one of them for 30 years if you think you're going to live in the home. How many people buy a home and say, this is my forever home, and 5 years later are already moving out?
Oh yeah.
Why? Because the new shiny stuff comes out all the time. It's not the same as when we were growing up. I mean, our parents were growing up. When our parents were growing up, homes weren't being built as quickly or as differently as there. You had a neighborhood in Baltimore City, for example, and I'll use Baltimore City as a perfect example. Most of the houses look almost identical, right? I mean, over a span of how many years they were built, 50, 60, 70 years, they're all kind of the same. There's no enticing to buy the latest and greatest home because there's no latest and greatest home. They all look the same.
Yeah.
So it's the same as your house. Why would you buy another home? You already got that house. I don't need to buy another one. But now, when new builders come out, everyone is building new types of homes. There's no one up. There's no meeting. What's it, keeping up with the Robinsons anymore kind of thing. The Robinsons have already they've changed 7 houses. You're keeping up with them because you're just keeping up with the 7 houses they built. So very few people, even when they go in there with the mindset, this is my forever home, leave it as their forever home. And so, I'm not being cynical or I'm not trying to be depressing when I say, when you're buying a home, I mean, you've got to be buying this with one eye on the future. Buying this as, hey, this is my investment property or my future investment property. And then as my finances grow, so too will my desire for my next home, right? I mean, I'm making $100,000 today, so I'm going to buy this $300,000 home, have a $2,400 a month payment right now, $2,500 a month payment. And as I progress through my business or my job, I'm going to convert this $300,000 home to my investment property for someone else to rent from me and buy my next home and buy my next home that matches what I feel comfortable with based on the salary that I have at that time, and so on and so forth. I mean, I had that sort of naive thought that, hey, I bought this house, I renovated it, I'm going to live here forever. And as soon as I got done renovating, I sold it and bought another home that I thought I was going to live in forever. And my life changed and I moved and I bought another home and so on and so forth. And there was a point where I started saying, well, listen, you know what? I just need to buy I need to build a portfolio for my retirement, my future. And so one of the things that most people don't think about but really need to is that if you have the ability to buy a home, even if it's not your permanent home, buy it with the intent to convert it to an investment property in the future. And I know a lot of people don't want to be landlords and things of that nature.
Because you only hear the bad stories.
Yeah, you only hear the bad stories,
That drives
right?
me crazy.
I mean, think about it from a plane crash. People hear the plane crash and they use a plane crash as the basis of, I'm never traveling. I'm never going to get in a plane. A plane crashed. Do you know how many times? I mean, I was just the other day, dropped my son off at the train station. And in the time period that I drove less than a mile, 4 planes, I was at the other end of the runway over at BWI, and I was just driving down a little strip, and there was a little traffic there, and a little light and stuff. 4 or 5 planes landed just in that little moment of time.
Yeah.
So when I take that and say within less than 10 minutes, 4 or 5 planes were landing, multiply it by the hundreds of airports thousands of airports across the nation, across the world, how many planes are going in and out?
Oh, it's crazy.
But then I base the fact that I'm never going to fly because I heard a plane had a crash.
Yes.
A better shot of winning the lottery, and I'm still willing to play a ticket.
Oh, yeah.
So why would I not get on the plane, right? So, then that's the same thing. I mean, there's just, there's so much things will change in life. I mean, so many things that you can't use it as the sole basis of, I'm never going to own an investment property because so many people have horrible renter stories.
And they just made that up in their head. They have probably not even heard one.
But, I mean, there are horrible rental stories situations. It happens. It is what it is. I've owned a number of rental properties myself, and fortunate enough, I have, knock on wood, I haven't had anything that was really that concerning that couldn't have been overcome. But what I learned a long time ago is that taking a home that I bought, converting it to, and I'll use this as a really great scenario. One of the best homes I ever bought was a home you sold me. It was a short sale. I paid $240,000 for it. It was a short sale. It was at one point worth about $400,000. Got it for $240,000. I've invested probably no more than about $80,000 into this home. That includes the down payment and fixing it up, and what I've done over the time period I've owned it, which is now 10 years almost, I guess, or maybe a little less than that. The house, I probably owe less than $100,000 on it now.
Beautiful.
House is worth, the building in the new builder in that community is building new homes that are smaller than that one at $485,000.
Oh, yeah.
And it'll go exponentially higher. So let's say at the worst, my house is worth $450,000, but I paid $240,000 for it. I owe less than $100,000 on it. But the beauty of it isn't the fact that I owe less than $100,000 or that it's worth $450,000. It's the fact that I've never paid a single mortgage payment on that home.
Yeah.
Someone else has built my equity. I have never done that, right? And so when you buy a home as your primary residence, I hate to say it, staying in your parents did it all wrong. Your parents screwed everything up when they stayed in their home for 30 years.
Yeah.
And why do I say that? Well, let's just do simple math. $1,000 a month. I buy a house at $100,000. I spend $1,000 a month for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
360 grand.
$360,000 to buy a $100,000 home.
Mm-hmm.
I paid $360,000 to buy a $100,000 home.
Mm-hmm.
Who out there would say, I'm going to invest $360,000 to get $100,000 back?
Well, I mean,
investment,
but you're
right?
not factoring in the appreciation, but I see your point.
Well, yeah, but sorry,
Yeah.
right. And even with the appreciation over time, let's just say hypothetically speaking, the house is worth $400
Yeah.
after that same time period, right? Time period later, I mean, now it's worth $400. I spent $360. I got a $400,000 investment. That doesn't take into consideration all that I've invested in terms of fixing that up over the 30 years and so on and so forth. So I'm probably upside down on it. So keeping a home for a certain period of time, especially now in today's market, very different, right?
Yeah.
Because now today, if you buy a home for $300,000, you can fair to say that over 20 years, it'll probably appreciate to, like, let's say a house you bought in 2005. House you bought in 2005, right now is probably, you paid maybe $300,000, $265 for it.
I would say.
It's probably worth maybe about $500, maybe $600 now.
Yeah.
Right? Where the market went to, where it came back to, it's about $600,000. But over the last 15 years, or 15, 18 years now,
Mm-hmm.
over the last 18 years, if you did the math on it, you definitely spent more than $600,000. You're coming up on the break-even point of what you put down as an investment, right? So you're probably not, if you may be breaking even or even upside down. Now, so you ask the question, why do I buy a house then? That just makes no sense. Because you're at least getting back what you at least all or at least a good portion of your investment. Inversely though, if you were to convert that over to a investment property, now I'll give you another example of another home that I bought.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a house in 2013. I lived in it for 5 years, and I just, in 2018, bought the house that I live in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the house I bought in 2013, I paid, you actually helped me with that one too.
Mm-hmm.
This was Leicester, 1307. Paid $412,000 for it.
That was a good buy.
Great buy, right? It's worth almost $650 right now, realistically, with where it is, where the market is, $625 to $650.
I would say, yeah.
I owned it for 5 years. At that time, it was a VA loan, so I owed like $420 something because I had a funding fee on top of it and all that. So the house now is, I owe $286 on it because I converted to a 15-year mortgage. So more goes towards the principal versus interest. I owe
awesome.
$286 on it. I haven't made payments on that for the last 5 years. I was calculating this the other day. I rent that house at $3,100. So let's just say I rented it for $3,000 for argument's sake. I'm coming up on the 5-year mark this December of having rented that house out. So for the last 5 years, I've rented it for $3,000 a month. I have gotten $150,000 from my tenants on that property.
It's amazing.
I've spent very little to keep it fixed up because it's been in great shape. It was
Yeah.
great shape when I converted it, so I haven't really spent very little in it. I've had $150,000, and I've gotten down to $286,000 on the note, of which $150,000 came from my tenants over the last 5 years.
Oh, it works.
That house worked out. Now, let's say I would have spent that extra $150,000 over the last couple of years. Yeah, I bought the mortgage down, but I paid to bring it down. So, I mean, did I really benefit there? Yes and no. I had a place to live, right? Because we always have to have a place to live.
You have to have a place to live.
So that's a different way to think about it, is living in a home for 5 years, 5 to 7 years, and then flipping it and converting it to an investment property and buying your next home.
Yes.
Let someone else make those payments.
Yes.
Because here's the reason why I own investment properties is that when I go into retirement, I'm going to only have but a couple buckets of income when I'm in retirement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 401ks. Why do we have 401ks? You know, people don't realize that when you put your money in now, let's say you're making $100,000 a year, you're paying a taxes on $100,000 a year. When you have a 401k, you're investing tax-free now because you're going to pay taxes later on that money. The government allows you now, I think it's $27,500 this year with the makeup. You can put it, if you're over age 50, you can put up to $27,500 in tax-free. After that, then you have to start paying taxes on what you invest in your retirement. The reason that they do that tax-free is they'll collect their taxes on the back end. Most people don't realize that you pay taxes on the 401k money when you take it out later on.
Yep.
But that's because you're making less money, so your overall income is a lesser tax bracket.
Yes.
So if you're 100,000, let's say your tax bracket is 30% of the 100,000, but if you're only making 25,000 or 30,000 or whatever it is, your tax bracket is 15%, right?
Yeah.
So you want to be taxed at a lesser amount when you get that money out and you need it in retirement. Well, you can only put so much money into retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Then where's your other source of income come from? All right, Social Security. So I got 401k, I got some Social Security money. If you max out Social Security, maybe you get 2,500. If Social Security is even going to be around, because they're always talking about how much Social Security is running out of money anyway.
Yep.
So even though we're putting into it, you're running out of it. And then you got a pension. And only some jobs offer a pension. Not all jobs have a pension. A lot of them just patch into the 401k. So if you weren't smart enough to put into your 401k and you only got 6% match from your employer, and you only put in maybe 10,000, and you got 6% match on the 10,000, well, you may not have as well a healthy of a 401k as someone else.
Yeah.
So Social Security and 401k you got. What other source of income you have?
Right.
You're a greeter at Walmart, which is nothing wrong with that, but you're in retirement. You want to travel, you want to do whatever.
Yeah.
You want to take it a little bit easy. You don't want to have to get a part-time job unless you unless you want to, not because you have to. Or, there's other jobs you can do, but the bottom line is you kind of retired. You don't want to work every day. You don't want to be beholden to a clock. So how do you generate revenue? For me, I looked at property as a perfect way to generate revenue. Mm-hmm. I said to myself, all right, while I'm working, I don't want the rent roll from my properties. And in some cases, some of the properties I have, I actually put money into. Like, for example, the one I was just talking about. I collect $3,150 a month, but I pay $3,500 a month on it. So I'm paying $350 out of my own pocket for that house.
Yep.
So by the time I turn 65, I'll owe nothing on my portfolios. On all my properties, I'll just collect rent on.
Yeah.
And then there's a point where you get to a certain age, you sell the entire portfolio, put the money into an investment account, and then draw from it what you need annually. Mm-hmm. Right? So, it's just, there's different ways to look at this. But if you start with, I gotta find my dream home, and I can't buy until I get my dream home, you miss the bigger picture.
Oh, yes.
On everything else.
If I would have never sold anything I ever had, I'd be a much richer man. Even at 53 right now.
Absolutely.
And I tell people that all the time. And that's not what a real estate agent should say. You should always sell it. But I'm like, keep it. Keep it. Keep it.
Yeah.
Because
buy more if you can.
Real estate doesn't go to zero.
Yep.
And every now and then you have to feed it. Every now and then you got to pay to replace the HVAC, the roof, different things. Just like any other investment.
Yeah.
But that sucker is appreciating. You get to depreciate on your taxes. There's so many things. And I hate when people tell the bad stories, and I instantly will interrupt them, which I never do. And I'm like, just because you don't hear the good ones.
Yeah. Well, that's true. You don't hear the good stories. You hear the bad stories. But there are so many people also that use bad stories as the means to justify bad decisions.
But those are also the people that don't have any investment properties because they don't want you to have any. So
Very
that's
true.
an envy thing too. So it drives me absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So
no, it's true.
So with the interest rates that are right now, they're 6.5. Where do you see, like my advice right now to all the buyers is, this is the time to buy, because when the interest rates go down, then we're going to get back into that stupid. I have to have overpay for a property. I can't do an inspection.
Yeah.
I have to pay over the appraised value. All of those things get back in, because that's the biggest difference. Like if you had to compare with me the 2.5% interest rates and the 6.5, the 2.5, there were 15 contracts.
Right.
I couldn't do an inspection. I had to pay $10,000 or $15,000 over appraised value, which is not included in a loan. I had to write that out, and then. A lot of times, what was another factor in that? Obviously you're overpaying it for it. What do you see? So now the advice is, you can negotiate with the sellers, right, because everybody that's in the market right now has to do something. Divorce, they're relocating, something's happening. This is not an ideal market for anybody. The buyer's the same way. Life changing, they're getting married, they're selling something. So right now it's a good equal market. My team's had its best year ever. What would you say the difference is from your perspective between the 2.5 stupid market that we were in, the COVID market, and right now? What do you think the difference is?
Well, you touched on it. There's there's negotiation that goes on right now when the market is somewhat more level, right? And what I mean by that is being more level. It's in the sense that, like you said, I mean, it's not a seller's market. It's not really a buyer's market. It's a level market where buyers and sellers can negotiate because neither of them are holding all the cards.
Correct.
There's still a lack of inventory, so there is sort of that piece. But because interest rates have gone up, and in October really, I think October was a turning point. I said, I told my team last year that November was going to be the turning point. This November. And we all can say in hindsight we knew this, but I really did. I mean, I kind of figured this would be the turning point, not because of anything other than the fact that there's going to be a pain point. And once we've reached that pain point, then and only then will we start turning the corner.
When did you say that November was going to be?
I'd say August of last year.
I remember you talking to me about
that 24 was going to be the year. Yeah. 24 was going to be a better year in the market. That you had to really buy last year. You had to spend the time, even if you didn't want to buy last year, you should have.
You mean 2023? Yeah, okay.
Even if you didn't want to buy, this is the time to buy. Because you're going to be able to negotiate with sellers. When interest rates come down, sellers are going to hold the cards again.
Absolutely.
This is what it is. And the interesting part about this industry is there's always those people that, there's never a perfect time. There's never the perfect storm.
No.
If you're looking for the perfect time, the perfect
to get married, to have children, none of that. You cannot.
Hey, I didn't buy in 21 because housing values were going up. I didn't buy in 22 and 23 because interest rates were going up. And housing values going to crash when rates go up. Where are you now? Because housing values didn't crash. Housing values are still strong. I think that 24, you're going to see rates come down. I don't think we'll ever get to the rates where we were before, minus a pandemic.
That was insane.
The rates were driven by a number of factors, but what drove those rates to that low, crazy number was also what drove our industry, our market, the last 2 years to these much higher numbers across the board for inflation and everything else, right? So when interest rates got to that point, the dollar became so less valuable, inflation went through the roof.
Yeah.
I mean, and think about it from the daily sort of why value the dollar became invaluable. When you think about the cost of buying things was so cheap, I could buy a $500,000 house for the same price I would buy a $300,000 house today. I mean, it's really what happened. When you think about it, the interest rate and the monthly payment for a $500,000 house at 2% is equivalent to what a $300,000 house is at 7%. So why not buy the $500,000 house? I don't buy a $300,000 house if I don't have to. So people made smart decisions back then. They bought those $500,000 houses for the same monthly payment they would for $300,000.
But you were lucky to be looking in that time frame.
Yeah, you just go at the
You
right
and
time.
I didn't buy a house in the 2% range.
No.
Because we had our houses.
Yeah, we had
houses.
And
most of the people, the opportunity there was to refinance and do some different things. But having a house is
what drove inflation and why this is probably a smarter and better market today than it was even then.
Oh, yeah.
What drove inflation is the fact that people didn't really care about the dollar. I mean, I'll use DoorDash and apologize to DoorDash in advance for saying this. DoorDash is a perfect example of where inflation, what was probably a catalyst for inflation in our environment. Think about DoorDash in its sense, right? DoorDash, you can get anything brought to your home. 2020 was perfect with the pandemic.
Yeah.
DoorDash took off. If I order Chick-fil-A, right, and I get it DoorDash to me, my $10 Chick-fil-A becomes $30. That's not an exaggeration.
I've never used it, so that's
when you start
nuts.
looking at DoorDash, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that, your $10 Chick-fil-A meal, your $11 Chick-fil-A meal becomes $30 easily. By the time they tack on the service fee, the delivery fee, and then of course you got a tip. You're not going to be that guy who doesn't tip, right? It's almost $30.
That's delicious.
But how many people still DoorDash, knowing they're spending $30 for an $11 meal?
Yeah.
What does that tell you about the value of the dollar? Their time is much more valuable than their money.
Yeah.
That's the textbook definition of inflation. All right. I mean, I don't care that it cost me $30 to get this $11 meal. I want it.
And it's delicious.
So why did rates stay as high as they did for as long as they did? Because even when interest rates were higher and it was costing people more money, they were still ordering DoorDash.
Mm-hmm.
It's to the point where people started losing their jobs. And think about how many people lost their job in our industry, right? You know, there's a lot of people in our industry lost their jobs. But now you're starting to see it in collateral jobs. You're seeing people in like the tech sector losing their jobs. It's when those pain points finally hit home, that's when you start seeing the reverse. And that's where we have gotten to. October was the highest point of this. It was also when you start looking at this, the suspending as a whole, less people are doing DoorDash in October, September and October than they were in the previous months.
Yeah.
Most people, now people are starting to say, wait a minute, I can't afford to spend $30 for an $11 meal. I'm still going to go out and buy the $11 meal. I'm not spending $30 to do it.
Yeah.
And check your own patterns, right? I mean, you as an individual, if you started changing your patterns, you weren't the only one. So did everyone else. And it was those points where people started changing their patterns that now you start seeing the decrease.
Yeah.
And keep in mind there's other factors too, right? We got an election coming up. We're now a year out from the election.
Oh yeah.
If you want to stay in office, you better make some changes.
Yes.
And if you want to get in office, you better highlight what changes need to be made.
Yep.
Right? So those are going to be driving factors in terms of the rates. So where I see 24, I don't think it's going to be a massive decline in rates. I don't think we're going to go from 6.5% to 4% overnight. And quite frankly, I don't think we're going to go below 5%.
That is a great
I
rate.
think 4.75 is probably going to be the lowest rate we get to. I think we're going to go back to 2018 rates.
What was 18?
4.75 would be a good, comfortable rate about in 2018.
That's right. Okay.
And I think that's where we're going to get our lowest point. I really don't think you're going to be. So people out there that, you know, when people come to me and say, well, you know, I don't want to spend 6.5%. You know, my logic is, look, spend the rate now.
Yes.
And then refinance it later. But if the payment at 4.75 isn't what you want, then you probably don't want this home, because I think that's where the rate's going to go to. Don't think that I'm going to buy this with the understanding that my rate's going to be 2% next year. It's not going to be 2% ever again. You know, and if it is, we've got a pandemic probably on the hand. So we don't. The rate is the least of our concern.
Yeah.
It's whatever brought down the rates to 2%. I think we're going to get down to about 4.75. We're probably going to hover there for a while. You may see increases, you may see decreases, but the long and short of it is, I think that's going to be a healthy rate. But what that's going to do is it's going to drive the market again. Because what's also happened during the time period this year, last year, during the pandemic, there are certain things that are just steadfast. People having babies grow up, they go to college, they don't go to college, they join the workforce, they buy homes. We have this going on throughout all of this. So we are still having a massive influx of buyers that are buying for the first time. We have a massive influx of sellers that are selling their homes to buy another home.
Yep. Or moving.
Moving.
Or divorcing.
Right. Or divorcing and separating
it's
homes.
Happening. Yep.
Whatever it is. And so these are going to still keep our industry strong. We've got responsible lending that is making people qualify for homes. You can't just get a home because you have a heartbeat and desire.
Yeah.
You actually have to qualify. And so with all these factors being said, as interest rates come down, there's going to be a greater influx of buyers in the market.
Absolutely.
For the reduced inventory available, which is going to drive prices up even more.
It's going to be bananas again.
And as long as responsible lending stays there, it'll regulate how much a house will go up.
Sure.
Right? Because, I mean, the truth be told is you can't go beyond the scope of what people can afford.
Mm-hmm.
And unless we get into a world where 2005, 2006, or 2004, where we start making, you know, people who are making $200,000 qualify for multi-million-dollar homes through creative financing, as long as we stay...
They're never going to get to 50, 60, 70-year loans, are they?
I don't think it's going to be 50, 60, 70-year loans. It was stated income, stated asset type loans.
Yeah, but we're not going to get to those long terms.
No, I think 40 would be the cap. I mean, we had 50 back in the day.
But what does that do to your payment?
Nothing. It's like paying interest. Just paying it. It's like you're not contributing anything to the principal of the house. You're superficially thinking you own a home, but you're basically just renting it from the mortgage company as opposed to renting it from a
40 years.
And the only downside of renting it from the mortgage company versus renting it from a landlord, the landlord's responsible to fix it. The mortgage company isn't.
Yeah.
So if you think going in a 40-year loan is or an interest-only loan is the option, yes, it can. Because honestly, you're just renting it from the mortgage company. Go and rent a property if that's the case, or find a cheaper property. But go and rent if that's the case, right?
The best way.
Finding a cheaper property is the best way. Build your portfolio from it. Find a home that you qualify for now.
I prefer
build
empire.
a portfolio. Build your empire. Yeah.
That's a better word.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Build your empire. Like I said, I think that I swear by rental properties. I think
I say it all the time.
For me, I own a number of properties now, and my hopes are, like I said, to own all of those by the time I retire.
Yeah.
Everyone's on a 10 or 15-year mortgage. I'll own them all by the time I retire, and that's a passive stream of income.
Yes.
I mean, that's just cash coming in. They say that people that are in that top 1% or 0.5% or greater have a portfolio of $10 million or more. People that are in that top 5% have a portfolio that exceeds $2.5 million. But the one prevailing theme that everybody in that region, in a generational wealth type situation, is that the vast majority of that wealth, 90% of that wealth, was generated through real estate.
Yes, because it never goes to zero.
Yeah.
You can measure it through the income approach of valuation,
Yep.
not market value.
Yeah.
So no matter what happens in the market, people are still going to cash flow it. They still have to make their payment.
That's it.
And
you got to have a place to live.
Yeah.
Do you want to own it or do you want to rent it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want your net worth to be based on what's in your savings account, or do you want your net worth to be based on what you invested in?
Yeah.
If I had to make a $2,500 a month payment, I have an option to have a net worth of $300,000, or potential net worth of $300,000, or I have a potential to have a net worth of whatever in my savings account.
Yeah.
Based on what I have there at that time in my
Yeah.
savings. And keep in mind what's in your savings account. Right now the interest rates are going up, so you are getting a little bit of money, but nothing like the rate of return you get on a home.
Yeah.
On an average comfortable growth model, 3 to 5%. On the accelerated growth model we're in right now, maybe 5 to 7% annually. So 3 to 5%. On a $300,000 house, anywhere between 10 to 15,000. 5 to 7%, 15, 20,000. Your savings account, 1%, 2%, 3% on whatever's in there. Maybe you got $10,000 in there. Maybe getting $300 a year.
Yeah. 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 It's back to that first-time home buyer. Get a great house. Buy what you can, and then build your portfolio or empire as you're able to do it, as your income increases, or you get married, or different things happen in life. But buying is better than renting. Yeah. All day long.
There's the old saying, day one or for one day. Day one or one day. Do I buy a home one day, or do I start my portfolio investment on day one? Today is day one that I start my portfolio investment.
That's right.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think next year is going to be a great year. And
I do too. I think next year, if you're in this market from a real estate perspective, if you're in this market from a mortgage perspective, you need to be working on what that looks like from business planning. Mm-hmm. Business planning is, that's one of the things we've always worked on is our business plan.
Yes.
And I think that you have to be ready to evolve with the market that you're in. You've got to embrace it, and you have to work within it, work within the scope of it. I mean, you can't just let it happen.
Yeah.
If you let it happen, you're not meeting your fullest potential, no matter how well you do. Even if you did 50 transactions this year and you just did them versus plan out and do as many more as you can, then you still haven't reached your full potential. I mean, you got lucky, but you didn't reach your full potential.
Yeah.
I think that this is something where long-term success, longevity, whether it's investing in homes or investing in your business, comes from proper planning.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about there's two sides of the argument on doing a lot of business. The good side of it is you get good at it, and then you don't have to have anybody do anything. I've worked with buyers for 2 or 3 years before they buy, and I'm relaxed about it. Everything's going to be okay. You don't like this house? Who cares?
Right.
And we go on, and the buyers get to know me, get to know the properties, get to know the neighborhoods, get to know you, and they're comfortable with it. That's a wonderful thing. But if you're an agent or a loan officer who doesn't do a lot of business, then that person becomes my car payment, my rent payment, and they're not giving you the advice that they need. Like I think you and I work well together just because it's like we never have a conversation like, I just wish they would buy something. It is never that way. They haven't found something yet. We're trying to figure it out. It doesn't work, and I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly fine with that. But a lot of people aren't, and I think that's just like anything else. If you're desperate, you don't make good decisions.
Absolutely not.
And if somebody's like, for instance, renters, they come to me, I'm like, when's your last payment? June. Okay, is that when your last payment is due? When is your last rental payment due? Right. June 1st. Great. We should start looking in February.
Yeah.
Why February? Because it's going to take us a while.
Yep.
We're not going to look in May.
Right.
Because it is, we got to find something. We got to find something. It's terrible. So, but the other side of that is we're going to find something in February they love, and then it's like, oh my gosh, what do we do? So then you get perspective, and then it goes back to it's never the last best real estate deal, which is like, okay, because what's consistent around here is there are no unique properties. Maybe some waterfront, maybe some really high end, but for the normal people, we'll find that house again, no problem.
Yeah.
So I like that aspect of it. Then they get to know me, and then I get to know them, and then we figure it out, and then it's nice, relaxed, and when it happens, it's great. You saw enough properties, you were diligent, you know what the loan programs are, you know what's down, you know what to ask for the sellers. They get to know the properties too, because as I'm going through, because I do about 80 inspections a year at least, I'm like, flashlight, look at that, look at this, we're not doing that. All of that's being discovered, and they get good at it too. And when the other wonderful thing is, after a while, people walk in and go, no, this is not it, and we laugh and we go to the next one. Or when they do find it, it's a wonderful thing. And I always say, I want to be high-fiving and hugging in the kitchen when we find something, not, I just need a house, Boyd.
Right.
That's terrible. But I like that part of it, and I like the fact that when somebody's pre-approved with you, they're like, when does that pre-approval expire? I'm like, it doesn't.
No.
If you stay the same, if you just have your job, you open your mail, you make your payments and all that. I don't say open mail because I think that's a terrible thing to say. But if you stay the same, that pre-approval stays the same.
Yeah.
And if the interest rates go up or down, the market goes up and down. So really, we're in a good spot. Wherever you are right now is probably where it's going to be 2 months, 3 months from now.
Sure, I agree with that.
And I like the fact that I do enough business to where I'm relaxed, because the people that I worked with 6 months ago, last year was the year of I've been working with them for a long time, and they finally bought, which was a wonderful thing. But that's where I want to get to. So that's good too. I wanted to say that as well. So that's the beautiful thing about doing a lot of business.
Yeah.
You want to do business with somebody who's good at it, does enough reps, figures it out. And that's why you and I work well together.
Yeah,
because nothing's desperate. And then when people are getting out of deals, they needed to get out of that deal. I'm the first to say, let's go. Let's get out. And the good thing about all of that stuff is understanding the contracts and understanding your rights. And you understand that as well, because we're coming up on inspection contingencies and different things, and we're doing very thorough inspections. People know stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just a better way to operate when it's not a desperate thing.
No, I agree. I think that this is an industry where, again, you can make crazy, hasty decisions as buyers, as sellers, as lenders, as real estate agents, and working with people that can take a pause, that can kind of put everything, compartmentalize everything, and help you compartmentalize anything, can help you within your deficiencies and your deficiencies or your attributes, right? Both as buyers, both as partners, both as everything. And I think that's why we have been as successful as we are, because whether we have the anxiety-ridden buyer, the anxiety-ridden listing agent or buyer's agent or anything, our expertise, our knowledge, and our confidence helps put everybody sort of, let's slow it down for a second.
Mm-hmm.
We can speed up if we need to, but let's just slow it down for a second and let's evaluate this thing as a whole.
Yep.
And go from there. So
yes.
I appreciate the partnership. It has been a great 10, 13, actually it's been more than 10 years because it's 2009, so we're 2013 coming to 2013. I appreciate the fact it's been 13 years.
Oh yeah.
And I look forward to 13 more years because at that point then I'm done. So I don't have to find a new partner.
Let's go.
So I'll be done at 13, 15 years and I don't have to find a new partner and then we can just, we can go work on those cars.
Yes.
We can go buy a bunch of old beat up cars.
Yes.
That are from the 1990s at that point.
That's
maybe
right.
in 2000. And yeah, so dude,
it's been great.
Been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. Mike's the biggest part of my business because without financing, it doesn't work. This is important. You will see him over and over and over again because as things change, this is November 2023, we'll be talking about something different, in the spring and throughout. Thank you very much. Please tune in to the Grainger Group channel. Thank you very much.
Thanks again for tuning in today, guys. I appreciate the opportunity to share some knowledge and share some of our perspective on the industry. This has really been a great first go run. We'll have more to come, and I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you are as well. Take care. Have a great day.